Hey guys, it's Kenny. I am a local cultural promoter. Today I have the chance of sitting down with three of Huntsville's talented authors. Let's get a chance to meet them. Okay guys, so tell me a little bit about yourselves and your writing.
Hey everybody, my name is Kenny Emmanuel. I am the author of The Dark Side of Light. I'm also an engineer who enjoys making video games.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shirley Garrett. I'm a retired psychologist, so I try to make every one of my characters psychologically accurate. I have authored 3 series. I've authored the Deadly Compulsion series, the Brianna Kelly Paranormal series, and the Hot Flash Diva series.
I'm Jared Austin, a young adult author of the Space City series.
So I had a chance to meet these authors a few months ago, and I have been blown away by the books that they are writing. So let's get to know them a little bit more. What encourages you guys to write the books that you've written?
For me, it's all about the characters. I love developing new characters, their backstories, special abilities, their interactions. I love designing and creating new people and putting them in different worlds.
I am compelled to write. And if I stop writing for any period of time, I will wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and it will keep waking me up until I get up and at least get that first chapter down. And I like to make each and every one of my characters real. And I find myself falling in love with them, except for some of the antagonists.
I just enjoy the writing process. I'm always thinking about my stories. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. I could be listening to a podcast or a story, watching something on TV, doing research, any number of places, and ideas will just come to me. And so I save bits of notes for myself for later. And then it's fun just to kind of start to piece them together and create something bigger.
So now we're going to get to know Shirley a little bit more. She has been writing books since 2014. She has 11 published and 3 self-help books out. So let's get right into it. So Shirley, when did you realize that you wanted to be a writer?
Probably in elementary school. I was one of those children that was fortunate that my parents read to me at night. And I was also one of those kids that maxed out my reading on the summers and got a certificate every fall. I love books, I love reading, I love the adventures, and I suddenly realized that stories were coming up in my head too. And so I started writing some short stories when I was a kid. When I got to my teen years, of course, I had to do poetry so I could have my angst out. And then as I got older, I was more interested in writing fiction.
Okay, I would love to know, Shirley, what out of all the books that you've written, which one is your favorite and why?
I think my very favorite one is Hot Flash Divas. It's a multicultural book about 4 women who have been best friends since college. And I love those characters. They are so full and rich, and the scenario of what happens is so real, and so many people relate to it. But more importantly, it made me laugh, and all the folks I hear from tell me it made them laugh too.
Okay, so with Hot Flash Divas, if you had to pick an audience member, who would be the perfect person to read that book?
Anyone between the ages of 30 to 70 that's female. And the guys even enjoy it too, if they're trying to figure out what makes these women act this way.
Okay, thank you, Shirley, for giving us that information. We're getting right into Jared Austin. He writes young adult science fiction books. So, Jared, what made you start writing young adult science fiction?
Thanks, Kenny. So growing up, I never really had much interest in science. The way it was taught in school, it was always a very dry, dull subject, just memorizing facts. And I never saw the applicability to my life. It was only as an adult when I went out to work at NASA for several years that I got to see all the cool and amazing things that science brings to not only the world, but our everyday lives. And I wanted to capture that in my book, showing all the amazing things that science and technology can bring for everybody.
Thanks, Jared, for that information. We're going to go right into Kenny Emmanuel. He is the author of Dark Side of Light. When you look at his book, he has tons of artwork. Kenny, I would love to know, does that inspire you while writing, or are you just a fan of art?
Both. I'm a fan of art and it inspires my writing. My stories are all about my characters, and I feel like the artwork in full view, displaying them, all the colors, really gives my readers an idea of what kind of characters I write. And so my goal as an author is really to bring my characters to life. And I feel like artwork is a piece of that.
Great, that was good to know. So it sounds like you put a little bit of you in each and every book that you write. When writing your books, where do your ideas come from? I know a few of you guys have said from childhood, but are there any other places? We would love to know more about that.
Like Shirley, I've been writing since elementary school. I was the kid who would write on the front and back, on the sides, on the edges of my sheet of paper because I had so much story to tell. Nowadays, a lot of my inspiration comes from everyday conversations. Just the other week, I was talking to someone and they mentioned IP addresses and what if we ran out of IP addresses, and that all of a sudden gave me a new story idea and I wrote 4 chapters in a couple of hours. Um, the time of day that I get most of my ideas is when I'm driving to and coming back from work. I don't know what it is, but the minute I get in the car where I can't write, that's where all the ideas come from. And I have to repeat them in my head for hours and hours until I can sit down somewhere and jot them down with a pen and paper.
Which made me want to ask you, are you like me? Do you keep paper and pen in the bathroom, the car, and beside your bed?
Well, now I use a application on my phone that'll sync it to my computer
Mm-hmm.
because I have lost those little notes and notepads. So I have a notepad, an online notepad with all my notes. And so whether it's through my iPhone, my iPad, or my computer, I can pull it up anywhere and continue my notes.
For me, I like to send myself emails on my phone, whether I am reading in bed to wind down for the evening or out and about somewhere. I come up with an idea for something I want to add into a story, and I'll just write myself a quick email so that I have that information saved for later. I'm also really big into research. A small idea might come up, and then as I'm trying to figure out how to weave that into my story, I love to deep dive into Google researching more about a particular topic, and that usually helps me flesh out a larger idea for for my stories.
So do you guys deep dive Google at night, trying to research things and verify the definition of a word? Or
I don't deep dive anything at night or I'll be awake all night.
usually awake all night.
That's why.
So I used to have the little notepad by on my nightstand because once you get that idea, you're not going to sleep. So then I would just roll over, pull it up, jot it down, and then I'm out.
Okay, so as Kenny and Jared has said, they both work 9 to 5 jobs. I would love to know, Shirley, where do you make time to write now? And gentlemen, please let me know too. We would love to hear, how do you pencil in creativity in your schedule?
When I first retired, I pretty much had my backside in the seat writing most of the day because I was trying to get things going. And so I was pretty much producing a book every 6 months. And that's pretty good for an author. So I was really happy with that. And things were working along well. And then I'm of a certain age that I can go to Studio 60. And so then it was like, oh, I need to go work out with weights. And oh, I'm in this pottery class. And I also am an artist. So I would go to the watercolor class and oil painting class and became so involved in all these things that I love. And still, I was doing pretty well on the writing until my husband retired. And all those who have retired spouses, you're laughing because I will be deep in a character and that character is talking to me and I'm typing away and I hear the patter of feet and I feel a presence over my left shoulder and it's him waiting to ask, you want to go for a walk? And so what can you do?
So it sounds like you found ways and found other things that bring you joy within your creativity bubble. But it was fun to hear about your husband and you finding time to still prioritize. I would love to know from you, Kenny and Jared, how do you guys find time to continue writing and fit it into your schedule?
Most of my creativity comes in the evening time, anyways. I'm a late night person, so I'm a zombie in the morning. So by the time I get home, I'll go out usually and do some activities with friends. And then about 8 or 9 o'clock is when I sit down to either start programming a video game, writing a chapter, attending our local writers' meetings.
There's so much beauty in hearing the way that you guys are making time for your creative outlets. The one thing that, with me being a creative, it is so hard when you have a 9 to 5 to continue to pour into your passion. And so seeing you guys have your books here and just being the authors that you are today is definitely a honor to be able to sit at the table with you guys.
It can be a bit of a challenge to find time to write between a day job. And then I have 2 young children. So during the evenings, my wife and I are getting them through their evening routine, dinner, ready for bed, and their next school day. But as soon as we've got them down to bed, I'm in my office working on my stories, or if I'm drafting the first draft of a novel, I dictate while taking walks.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. Tell me more about your dictation, Jared.
Sure, Kenny. I first started dictating during the early parts of the lockdown during COVID. We weren't allowed to really get out and go anywhere, and I got tired of being locked up at the house. So I would just go walk around my neighborhood dictating first drafts of my novel that I was working on. And then I would bring that back home, use technology to create a transcript of the file, and then I would go to revising it.
Jared's been trying to get me into dictation too, but I kind of do the opposite. After I've written a draft, I'll have my phone read it back to me, and I find out that I can catch a lot of mistakes that way. So it's interesting how we use technology to better our writing, especially during these times.
See, I find it hard to do that because when I used dictation when I was practicing, it was so and so is a 24-year-old white female with problems with anxiety. And so it was so cut and dried. I really find it hard to break that habit of doing that.
That was so interesting. I love hearing all of you guys' different perspectives about using technology to be authors. And I love hearing about your perspective as well, Shirley, about how you really don't use dictation, but it doesn't make them using it any different. So let's get right into your Breonna Kelly series. I was super excited to start reading that book because it's based in Huntsville. How cool is that? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Pretty much, I base most of my books in the Huntsville area because, to be absolutely truthful, I'm a little lazy. If I go on vacation somewhere, I might add that in. But I also find that my readers love to go through the streets of Huntsville or Alabama or North Alabama and say, oh, I ate at that restaurant, or oh, I know exactly where that is. And this whole book series basically came from the preface of, what if you had a reluctant psychic who could see and hear ghosts, whose best friend loved everything to do with the paranormal? And that's how I started with my 2 characters, Breonna Kelly, the psychic, and her best friend, Mystery Jones.
So that was great hearing about Breonna Kelly and Mystery Jones. Kenny, I would love to hear your perspective. What do you think really makes a good story?
I think what makes a good story is the ability for readers to relate to the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And, I read some of the Breonna Kelly stories, and I believe a lot of the local readers can relate to the restaurants they've been to the streets, the historic areas. One big thing is in the Breonna Kelly series is she really goes into depth on the food spread. And let me tell you, I think was it Mystery's mom?
Yes.
Yeah, Mystery's mom. She's always coming out with some local dish, and it's always the feast. And so as you read that, you kind of start to salivate and think about the food. And I think that's really important that you especially mention not only the technologies, but the food, the locations that people are familiar with, because then they will relate to what you're talking about more. They'll feel excited, they'll feel energetic, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I went there. Or they'll be like, well, I haven't tried that yet. Let me go over there. If I was Shirley, I would be waiting for the opportunity for someone to walk into a restaurant, point to the page in the book and say, hey, can I have this meal right here? And I think that's just very exciting.
So, Kenny and Jared, being that you guys write sci-fi novels, I would love to hear where, of course, you went into talking about what makes a great story with Shirley's book, but what do you guys think makes a great story when you're writing your books?
For me, it's character development. One of the comments I get for my stories is no matter how fantastical they are somehow still grounded in reality. And I've developed my characters to a point where my readers feel like this could actually happen. Um, for some of my more recent stories, they think it's a little more horror based. They're like, wow, that's technology in the future. That I feel like that could happen, and that's pretty scary. So for me, what makes a story great is the character development, how a character goes from one point to another in their life, and all the challenges they face to get there.
I am really a big plot person. I love to see a plot twist or something happen outside of the characters because sometimes, especially with different types of books, I can't relate to the character. So the plot always drives me in. The one thing that I loved about your book, Jared, is that it does that. Space City really just kept me reading. Could you tell us a little bit of more of how you developed that storyline?
Plot has always been a big part of a big driver for me in writing my stories. I love to take my characters and put them in all kinds of strange and unusual situations, like attending academy in space and taking final exams on Mars.
Okay, Shirley. So, my question to you, if you have writer's block, do you have any tips or what would you say helps you get through writer's block? Because you've mentioned already that you have other things that feel that creative spirit in you, and your husband loves to take walks. So, what would you do if you came to a situation where you had a writer's block?
I'm probably the worst one you could ask about this because I've never had writer's block. I have written myself into a corner and had to add a different POV and go back and rewrite. But to be truthful, I have like 4 different books waiting right now to start writing on. So that is not an issue for me. Maybe one of these guys can give you more information on that.
Yeah, so I would love to hear from either Kenny or Jared. Do you, either one of you experience writer's block, especially with you guys having really busy lifestyles? Is there a way that you get through that, or are there any tips for other writers out there?
I do get writer's block every once in a while, but I'm also working on 2 or 3 stories concurrently. So if I get stuck on one story, I'll just move to a different one and continue writing that. When I get stuck, I have a music playlist for each story, and I'll just listen to those tracks, and that will get me back into the story and writing it again.
And that is really a good thing because I usually have 2 to 3 books going at a time. And when you feel like you're just tired, you can switch to that other book and it's just fresh.
Yeah.
For me, I'm such an extensive researcher. I build really long outlines before I even start writing. That helps me keep going and avoid writer's block. Where I do have issues sometimes is when I'm specifically writing a scene, I might struggle for a few minutes trying to come up with exactly what a character is going to say or what they're going to do, but I'm usually able to push through that pretty quickly and develop something.
That was really encouraging to hear, especially because you would assume that all authors have writer's blocks. So, thank you guys for sharing your experience with that. Now, what I would love to get into, of course, your authors, but let us know, what are your favorite books to read? And are they in the same genre that you write in? Do you have a genre that you love to read that you don't specifically want to write in? Let us know all of that information. I'll go to you first, Shirley.
Oh, goodness. I read all over the place. I love mysteries. I like thrillers. I like crime thrillers. I love fantasy. I like Patricia Briggs stuff because she creates such a unique and whole world. I like things that are funny, like Janet Ivanovich and her capers of going about trying to be a person who catches criminals when she's not very talented, but she is persistent. Just I love a variety of things to read. I'm not much into literature, which is kind of funny because I am writing my first literature book.
Like Shirley, I like to read all over the place. I read science fiction, I read crime fiction, nonfiction, horror. It just depends on what I'm in the mood for at a particular moment. And I'm always jumping around.
I like to read science fiction and fantasy because of the large, sprawling, and amazing worlds that are created. But my go to whenever I get stuck on ideas or anything like that is the Fearless series by Francine Pascal, which is about a girl born without the fear gene. So again, it's similar to my writing where you have this character who does these amazing things because they don't have that gene, but it's also grounded in reality. You know, she's kind of going through high school, trying to deal with all the chaos around her and her need to fight because she's not afraid. But that's been one of my favorite series. I do tend to avoid reading some science fiction because then my voice starts to sound like whatever I'm reading. I think an author's voice is very important, and I don't want to, you know, I don't want my stories to sound like somebody else's writing. So every now and again, I'll take a break from reading science fiction and fantasy, read my own stories to get back into my voice.
I love hearing how you guys talk about the different books that you love to read. For me, I am a young adult fan, but I have been getting into different genres. The one thing that I would love to hear from you guys is that if you were to tell any other young author out there just starting out, what would be one tip that you would give them?
First thing I would recommend is to write. Just keep writing and reading things about writing and how to improve your writing. And then after that, join a writer's group or two, which could be very helpful.
I love to hear that because I do think that there are powers in numbers. The one big thing about seeing you guys sitting here together is that you guys support each other. So not only is community a big thing, but like Shirley said, make sure that you keep doing your research. And of course, if you want to be a writer, you have to write. So thank you for that, Shirley. Kenny or Jared, give us a tip.
I agree with Shirley. The first and foremost is write the story. And actually, since I moved to Huntsville, the first group I joined was the National Novel Writing Month group. And the goal of that is during the month of November, write 50,000 words. And that what that encourages new writers, aspiring writers, those who are stuck with writer's block, is just to write the story. You can always go back and edit it. You can go back and change chapters, but write the entire story so you can at least look back and see what you want to change versus trying to keep everything organized in your head.
I think that is so that's great to hear. Believe it or not, me and my husband tried to write a book in college. We did not continue writing, so that's why we don't have a book. So you guys are giving me this information just so I can take back home. Jared, let's hear what tip would you have for someone that's just starting off writing?
Like Shirley said, a writer's group is a great way to keep moving forward with your writing. That encouragement and critique is extremely important to progress as a writer. I would also say study what other authors do, whether it's their writing or how they communicate with their readers. Learning what other more successful authors do can only help you learn to get better yourself.
Where can you find these books? Can you guys let us know if we can visit you locally, if there's any pop-up shops, or if you have any events coming up? Please let us know because when I tell you guys these books are good, they are, and you'll want to get your hands on them. So Shirley, can we hear from you first?
A lot of people buy my books at craft shows and art shows because I'm also displaying my art. So I have on November 18th, which is a Saturday, the Studio 60 Senior Center and on Drake Avenue in Huntsville is having a Christmas art show. And so it's a perfect place to come pick up arts and crafts, my books, other people's books maybe, things that maybe you just don't see anywhere else. And then, of course, I have the NECA, Northeast Alabama Craft Show, which is the big show for Christmas in the Civic Center South Hall, which is huge. And I will be there on December 1st, 2nd, 3rd. So I'm looking really forward to that. Other than that, you're welcome to IM me. I actually have people IM me wanting to get with me for books, but go to Amazon. All my books and ebooks are on Amazon, and I am working on audiobooks for next year.
Okay, Jared and Kenny, where can we find your books, or where can we see you next?
My books, I have my own store, jareddanielaustin.com. They are also available on any retailer, wherever you like to buy books. And then Kenny and I are actually going to an event at Low Mill, also November 18th, called the Gobble Gobble Hay Fest.
Yeah, all of my books are available on Amazon as well. I only recently published in the last 2 years. So Shirley's been a big inspiration as far as talking to us about some of the events she goes to. She goes to all kinds all over Huntsville. So I picked up a couple of those on my agenda, and I'm hoping to see you guys out there.
So before we get out of here, I would love to know, what do you do for fun outside of writing?
Well, of course, I told you I love to paint. I do watercolors, acrylics, and oil painting. But I also love to go hiking with my husband, Bob, and love to travel with him. And we are ballroom dancers, so nothing to me is more pleasurable than being held in my husband's arms and taken across a dance floor.
That is so beautiful, and I think you need to write a romantic novel next. Let's hear from you, Kenny. What brings you joy outside of writing books?
I enjoy playing video games. I also enjoy making video games. I've also been playing board games. I have over 200 board games, and me and my group have been recording our board game playthroughs so that we can share them with the community.
Well, that is great. I'm definitely going to have to come over for a board game. Hopefully, it's something that I can play. I doubt that it's Monopoly, though. But let's get into hearing from you, Jared. What brings you joy outside of writing your books?
Thanks, Kenny. I also like to play video games a lot. I play a lot of Nintendo games, family friendly, with my kids. I'm also an avid runner, and I'm currently training for a half marathon.
So we're going to wrap up this interview. Super excited to be able to sit down with these three local authors. As you guys heard them say, community is a big thing. So if you're looking at writing, make sure to look locally for different communities to write with. And then once again, keep writing. But I want to make sure before we get out of here, they tell you where you can find them at. So let's get right into that. And I'll see you guys in the next one.
Kenny, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about our passion projects. You can find me on Facebook at Kenny Emmanuel Author, and all my links are available on my website, www.kennyemmanuel.com.
I really enjoyed this also and spending times with my buddies. You can find me on my website, shirleybgarrett.com. That's 2 R's and 2 T's in Garrett. Also, you can find me at Facebook, Shirley B. Garrett, or Shirley B. Garrett SciD. I have 2 different Facebook pages and Instagram.
Thank you as well, Kenny. I really appreciate your time. You can find me on my website, jareddanielaustin.com, and on Facebook at Jared Daniel Austin.